It started as a joke, an initiation ritual for seniors at Crestfall High. The Midnight Club, they called it. Every year, 5 students would gather in the old, crumbling basement of the school on Halloween night. They would light candles, sit in a circle, and tell ghost stories. Nothing more than a bit of fun. But every now and then, the stories felt too real, the air too heavy, and the darkness too deep. And sometimes those who joined the club didn't come back the same. This year, it was Thomas, Mia, Sarah, Daniel, and Lucas. They weren't friends, just classmates thrown together for the sake of tradition. Each had received the same invitation, slid into their lockers with no name, no signature, just a message scrawled in jagged handwriting: midnight, basement. Tell the story, survive the night. Thomas was the first to arrive. The basement smelled of mildew and dust, a relic from when the school had been built in the early 1900s. He could barely see in the dim light, his flashlight casting eerie shadows on the peeling walls. He wasn't scared, just a little uneasy. He didn't believe in ghosts, but the basement had always creeped him out. It was the kind of place that felt wrong, like the air itself held old, forgotten memories. Mia came next, always the brave one. "So, we really doing this?" she asked, her voice echoing through the empty space. "Seems like it," Thomas replied, glancing at his watch. "We're still waiting on the others." Sarah and Daniel arrived together, their faces pale in the cold October air. Lucas came last, looking as though he'd rather be anywhere else. The 5 of them gathered in a circle, each holding a small candle. "Okay, let's get this over with," Sarah muttered, pulling her hoodie tight around her. Mia grinned, trying to lighten the mood. "Come on, it's just a bunch of stories. What's the worst that could happen?" The group lit their candles, and for a moment, the flickering flames cast strange, dancing shapes on the walls. The basement seemed smaller, the air thicker, and a cold draft whispered through the room. Thomas went first. "There's a story," he began, "about a student who used to come here, back in the 50s. His name was Jimmy Carter. No, not the president," he added quickly when Lucas raised an eyebrow. "This Jimmy was a loner. He didn't fit in, and one night he decided to come down to the basement. People said he was trying to contact the dead, that he wanted to prove ghosts were real." Thomas leaned forward, his voice dropping to a whisper. "He never came back. They found his body the next morning, hanging from the pipes. But the weird thing? There was no sign of how he got up there. No ladder, no chair, nothing. They say that if you come down here at midnight and say his name 3 times, you can hear the sound of the rope creaking, like he's still hanging there." A long, uncomfortable silence followed. No one laughed. "Well, that was cheerful," Mia said, rolling her eyes. "Let's move on." She took a deep breath, her eyes darting around the room as if she didn't really want to start. But the rules were clear. Once you joined the Midnight Club, you had to finish. "There's a room in the east wing of the school," Mia began, her voice steady but soft. "Room 301. They say it's cursed. Back in 1992, a girl named Rebecca Langston was taking a test in that room. She was one of those overachievers, always stressed about grades. During the test, she just snapped. Stood up, screamed, and then she slit her own throat with a pencil." Lucas shuddered, and Sarah's candle flickered as if the air had grown colder. Mia continued. "The weird part is, after she died, strange things started happening. Students reported hearing scratching noises, seeing things written on the chalkboard that no one remembered writing. They tried closing the room, but every time they did, something bad happened. A fire broke out, someone got sick, another student went missing. So they left the room open, but no one uses it. They say if you sit in her seat at midnight, you can still hear her breathing." The group exchanged nervous glances. None of them had heard these stories before, but there was something about the way Mia spoke that made it feel like it wasn't just a story. Sarah went next, her voice trembling as she spoke. Her story was about the janitor who used to work at Crestfall, who supposedly died on the job after falling from a ladder. But students would still see him, mopping the floors late at night, his ghostly figure moving through the halls, leaving wet footprints that never dried. Daniel's story was shorter, but no less unsettling. A tale of a music teacher who vanished without a trace, only to have her ghost seen sitting at the piano, playing a haunting melody that echoed through the music wing late at night. Finally, it was Lucas's turn. He was pale, his eyes wide, as if something was already gnawing at him. I don't
have a story.
he said quickly, his voice barely a whisper. The others stared at him, confused. You have to tell one, Thomas said. It's the rule. Lucas shook his head.
No, I think we're living one.
Before anyone could ask what he meant, the candles flickered again and the temperature in the room plummeted. The basement door, which they had firmly closed behind them, creaked open. At first it seemed like a gust of wind, but then they heard it, the sound of footsteps, slow and deliberate, coming from the darkness beyond the doorway. What the hell? Mia whispered, standing up. The footsteps grew louder, closer, but there was no one there. The air felt heavy, oppressive, as if something unseen was watching them. And then from the shadows, a voice, low and guttural, whispered,
You shouldn't be here.
The candles went out. Panic set in. Thomas fumbled for his flashlight, but when he clicked it on, the beam barely cut through the thick darkness. In the faint light, they saw it, an outline of a figure hanging from the pipes, its face twisted in agony, the noose tight around its neck. Mia screamed, and suddenly the figure dropped to the floor, disappearing into the blackness. The sound of the rope creaking echoed through the room. They bolted for the door, their footsteps pounding on the cold concrete as they scrambled up the stairs. The basement door slammed shut behind them, as if whatever was down there was locking them out, or locking itself in. Outside, in the safety of the cold night air, they collapsed on the steps of the school, gasping for breath. We're done, Thomas panted. We're never going back down there. But as they caught their breath, Lucas looked back at the school, his face pale and expressionless. We're not done, he whispered, his voice distant, hollow. It's just beginning. And in the dim moonlight, as the others turned to leave, no one noticed the faint rope marks around Lucas's neck.